Social Studies Module 2, World History. Prehistory. Prehistory is the time before written records were kept, 10,000 to 5000 BCE. Humans transitioned from hunter-gatherers to farmers who settled to cultivate crops and domesticate livestock. Proto-writing, or pre-writing, used a system of symbols to represent ideas, but not individual words or grammars. In 4000 BCE, Sumer, located in Mesopotamia, was one of the earliest known complex civilizations with city-states and cuneiform writing on clay tablets. The Egyptians followed with the development of hieroglyphics shortly after, as did other cultures. The earliest systems of writing were developed around 3500 BCE. It is important to note that dates are approximate and that different scholars specify different exact dates. Early African civilizations. Ancient Egypt was one of the earliest civilizations, with an empire existing along the Nile River in northern Africa around 3400 BCE. Among the many contributions of ancient Egypt were the development of papyrus, a plant-based paper, and the development of complex irrigation systems to divert water from the Nile River to their crops. Egyptians also made incredible contributions to farming and agriculture with the ox-drawn plow and the sickle for harvesting. Egyptians are well known for the development of new architectural styles, including the pyramid tombs for their deified rulers, the pharaohs. Pharaohs were believed to be the incarnation of gods and had absolute power that was handed down generationally. Early European civilizations. The Greeks and Romans are among the most recognized ancient civilizations in Europe for their contributions to culture, government, mythology, and art. Because of their systems of writing and record-keeping, we have detailed knowledge of their civilizations. In addition, there were Viking societies in northern Europe who were explorers, fishers, raiders, and mercenaries. Beyond these, there were the Gauls, the Celts, and other Germanic tribes that inhabited Europe. Early civilizations in North America. The first people to inhabit North America crossed a land bridge from what is now Siberia to Alaska approximately 10,000 years ago. From there they migrated south to settle much of the North American continent. These individuals lived in tribal societies that developed complex mythologies, governments, and cultures. Each native tribe had their own language, mythology, culture, and traditions. It is important to remember that there was no single Native American culture, but that Native Americans had many different cultures. While some tribes were primarily hunter-gatherers, others developed domesticated crops and domesticated livestock. Native Americans lived in a variety of different structures, including the Iroquois longhouse, the Anasazi cliff dwellings, and the wigwams or domed dwellings. When the Europeans made first contact with the native people, many failed to realize they were encountering a complex society with ancient traditions and its own culture. Classical civilizations. The Persian Empire. The Persian Empire, headquartered in Perapolis, was located on the land that makes up the modern-day nation of Iran. The Persian Empire was founded by Cyrus the Great in 550 BCE and would expand to cover over 3,000 miles, taking in much of the Middle East and northern Africa. The religion of the Persians was called Zoroastrianism, a religious ideology that would influence many other religious faiths that followed. Over time, Islam would come to replace Zoroastrianism as the dominant faith in the region. The Persian Empire was conquered by Alex the Great in 334 BCE. Classical civilizations. India. This time in India was known as the Vedic period. The Vedas are a series of poetic hymns written in Sanskrit. They are the transcription of knowledge that had been passed down through generations of oral history. The Vedas are the foundation of the Hindu religion. Buddhism is also a religion native to India that came from this time period. There is some discrepancy as to the date of Buddha's birth, but it is believed to be between 560 and 480 BCE. The caste system, A system of social classes reinforced by the Hindu religion came from this period and still exists as part of Indian culture even in the modern world. Classical civilizations. China. Time periods in classical China were known as dynasties because they were named for the family that ruled during that time. Confucius was one of the best-known thinkers and philosophers of this period, and his philosophy of reason and social duty, Confucianism, is still read and studied today. Gunpowder, paper, printing, and the compass are a few of the technological advancements attributed to ancient China. In addition, China developed advanced military tactics and strategies that set the standard for militaries across the world. Sun Tzu, 500 BCE, is still one of the most studied military strategists and leaders in human history. Review question. Which of the following were the accomplishments of prehistoric and ancient civilizations? A. Developing written language. B. Developing governmental systems. C. Developing irrigation, agriculture, and animal husbandry. Or D. All of the above. The correct answer is D. All of the above. Ancient civilizations on many continents developed written language, developed governmental systems, and developed irrigation, agriculture, and animal husbandry. These were some of the greatest achievements of the ancient world. Classical civilizations. Greece. Ancient Greece was a collection of city-states consisting of an urban center and the surrounding countryside. Each city-state had its own form of government, laws, and philosophy, and they were very different from one another. There was no overarching government, so city-states could form alliances and/or declare war on one another. Some of the largest and most famous city-states are still well known today. Athens was known for its philosophers and learning, and is credited as one of the birthplaces of democracy. Sparta was known for its powerful military and militaristic culture. Chalcis was known for its metalwork and minerals. Corinth was known for its ornate agriculture and pottery. Delphi was known as a religious center and the home of the Oracle of Delphi. And Thebes was known for producing silk. Classical civilizations. Rome. According to legend, the Roman Empire was founded in 753 BCE by Romulus and Remus, two brothers who were demigods. Romulus killed Remus and named the city of Rome after himself. While the supernatural origins may be questionable, Rome started as a city around this time and expanded its control over the surrounding area. Rome drew its religious, architectural, and cultural ideas from its Greek neighbors, thus the many similarities in Greek and Roman mythology. The Romans conquered the Greeks in 146 BCE and took control of Egypt in 31 BCE, solidifying their control of much of the known world. The Roman Empire was officially founded in 27 BCE and lasted until 476 CE. Unlike the Greeks, the Romans had an imperial system of government where they would take control of an area, but still allow some level of local governance as long as the people remained under Roman control and continued to pay taxes to Rome. Review question. How were Greek and Roman systems of government different? A. Greeks had a democracy and Romans did not. B. Romans had democracy and Greeks did not. C. Romans had an imperial system of government and Greeks had individual city-states. Or D. Romans had slavery and Greeks did not. The correct answer is C. The major difference in the Roman and Greek systems of government was that Rome had an imperial system of government and that the Greeks had individual city-states. The fall of Rome in the Middle Ages. 395 CE is generally regarded as the date of the fall of the Roman Empire, but it is important to know that Rome had been experiencing social and political division for some time prior to this date. After the fall of Rome, there was a period of conflict as different groups sought to fill the vacuum of power. As leaders emerged and conquered land, they began to parcel out their land to their loyal followers, laying the foundations for the feudal system that would define the governments of the Middle Ages. Feudalism was a hierarchical society in which a king held land and parceled that land out to nobles. The nobles in turn parceled the land into fiefs, which were given to their vassals to maintain in the noble's name. Peasants, the lowest people in feudal society, were tied to the land and were under the rule of the noble's vassal. At every level of feudal society there was an expectation of fealty or faithfulness to the people higher in the chain. This fealty included financial and military support offered to the noble or the king. The Middle Ages is generally characterized as lasting from 400 to 1400 CE. Review question. What was the system of government that developed after the fall of Rome that existed throughout the Middle Ages? A. Fiefdom, B. Nobility, C. Fealty, or D. Feudalism? The correct answer is D. The system of government that existed throughout the Middle Ages was feudalism. Renaissance and Reformation. The Renaissance was a time of transition in European history between the Middle Ages, which lasted from the 400s to the 1400s, and the Enlightenment, which was the 1600s and the 1700s. The Middle Ages was characterized by a feudal system of government where nations ruled by monarchs and nobles. This system of government was supported by the Catholic Church's teaching that kings ruled by divine right, meaning they were chosen by God to be born a king. Because the government and the church worked together, going against the government was a sin, and going against the church was going against the law. There was no separation of church and state. Renaissance and Reformation. The Renaissance was a time of rebirth when people looked back to the ancient Greeks and Romans to learn about art and philosophy. This was called Renaissance humanism because people were looking to early humans rather than to the supernatural to gain a better understanding of the world around them. There was also a shift from faith to reason and a strong focus on empirical evidence, or evidence that can be experienced through the senses. This shift caused major changes in every field of study, from Galileo developing a telescope and saying that the Earth went around the sun, to Magellan sailing around the world and proving that it wasn't flat, to the discovery of continents beyond Europe. This was a time when knowledge in every academic field increased exponentially. The increase in scientific knowledge also led to a shift in religious ideology. Where previously kings had ruled with absolute power and the church had been the unquestioned judge of what was true, people began to question both their governments and their faith. In 1517, a German monk named Martin Luther nailed his 95 Theses to the door of All Saints' Church in Wittenberg, Germany. His primary concern was that the Catholic Church was selling indulgences, or forgiveness for sins, in an effort to raise money. In addition to Luther, King Henry VIII of England broke away from the Catholic Church in 1534 because the Pope refused to grant him an annulment, a legal ruling that his marriage was null and void because it was never legally valid. This break was the beginning of the Church of England. Although England would revert to Catholicism under Queen Mary, it would again become Protestant under Queen Elizabeth and would remain so. Review question. What major change influenced the Renaissance period? The diminished authority of religion, the fall of the Roman Empire, the invasion of the Ottoman Empire, or the Napoleonic Wars? The correct answer is A. The major change that influenced the Renaissance period was the diminished authority of religion. Plague. The plague is a disease caused by flea bites. The disease was spread throughout the world due to rats on ships that were infested with plagued fleas. Plague killed almost half the population of Europe and caused a significant reduction in the world population. The disease could take different forms, including the pneumonic plague, which primarily affected the lungs, the bubonic plague, infecting the lymph nodes, and the septicemic plague, infecting the bloodstream. Religious pilgrims played a large role in spreading the plague because they would travel from their homes to religious sites at specified times of the year. This, along with the Church's inability to stop the plague, caused people to further question their understanding of religion. Colonization. Colonization is the process of taking control of an area by subjugating the people who are native to that area. When an area is colonized, the colonizers take away the people's right to self-governance and impose their laws and rule. They also appropriate resources that belong to the native people for use by the colonizing country. Colonizers may ship resources back to their own country, or they may bring settlers to displace the native people and take their land as well as their resources. European countries colonized much of North America, Africa, and Asia from the 1500s to the 1900s. The Columbian Exchange. In 1492, Christopher Columbus sailed to the New World, the European term for the American continents. This contact started a series of exchanges of foods, crops, ideas, and diseases. Many native populations in America did not have immunity to European diseases, so diseases spread rapidly and killed many. Some of the most devastating included the measles, smallpox, whooping cough, typhus, and malaria. The Columbian Exchange also bolstered the slave economy, forcibly moving people from Africa to North America. While there were many negative aspects of the Columbian Exchange, there were also some positive changes. Many crops were brought to Europe, including potatoes, maize, tomatoes, and tobacco. Europe also sent livestock to the New World, including horses, donkeys, mules, pigs, cattle, sheep, goats, and chickens. There was also a significant cultural exchange that took place with the spread of Christianity and European languages that are spoken in North and South America today. Review question. What was the Columbian Exchange? A. A trade route to the nation of Colombia on the South American continent. B. The transfer of people and cultures between Europe and Africa and the Americas. C. A political agreement between the colonies and England for exchanging goods. Or D. A voyage taken by Christopher Columbus to exchange ships before traveling to the New World. The correct answer is B. The Columbian Exchange was the transfer of people and cultures between Europe, Africa, and the Americas. Major revolutions in world history. After the American Revolution in 1776, many other revolutions followed as a result of the Enlightenment. In 1789, the French Revolution overthrew the aristocracy and attempted to establish a new government. From 1793 to 1794, France experienced the Reign of Terror, where over 16,000 people were executed for opposing the revolution. In 1799, Napoleon Bonaparte became the first consul, the leader of France. In 1804, Napoleon was declared Emperor of the French and began seeking to expand his empire through the Napoleonic Wars, which lasted from 1803 until 1815. In 1812, Napoleon unsuccessfully attempted to invade Russia and lost a large part of his army and many of his resources. He abdicated the throne in 1814 and was exiled in 1815, officially ending his reign and the Napoleonic Wars. French Revolution, terms to know. Nationalism. Caring only about one's own country to the exclusion or harm of other countries. Nationalism can be based on ethnicity, culture, or ideology. Imperialism. A nation that practices imperialism seeks to expand its control over other nations. This may be done through colonization, as it was before the American Revolution. It can also be done through diplomatic means, where other nations become protectorates of more powerful nations, but are also under the powerful nation's control. Finally, imperialism can be achieved through sphere of influence or economic imperialism, where a country uses trade and economic incentives as a means of control. Industrial Revolution. The Industrial Revolution was a time of dramatic change that occurred between the mid-1700s and the mid-1800s. Machines were developed that revolutionized agriculture and eliminated the need for many manual laborers. In addition, machines had replaced many of the artisans or skilled craftspeople who produced handmade goods. As a result, people moved to cities, and both Europe and the United States experienced urbanization, the concentration of people in smaller geographic areas, usually surrounding centers of trade, shipping, and manufacturing. World War I, 1914 to 1918. World War I started with the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand on June 28, 1914. Because of this assassination, Austria-Hungary demanded action from Serbia, but they did not fully comply. Because of the alliances held by different European nations, the war spread to involve all of Europe. There were two major factions. The Triple Entente was France, Russia, and Great Britain. The Triple Alliance was Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Italy. Note, Italy changed sides because they felt their treaty was only defensive in nature and did not cover offensive military actions. They also depended on France for much of their imported goods, especially coal. The United States did not enter World War I until 1917. The U.S. entry into the war was in response to German attacks on American ships and their attempt to stop supplies from going to their enemies. In addition, Germany offered to help Mexico regain territories that it had lost to the United States in exchange for an alliance. World War I was known for its trench warfare and for the first use of machine guns and tanks in war. It was also known for the first use of mustard gas and other agents of chemical warfare. Review question. Why did European countries not directly connected to Austria-Hungary or Serbia get involved in the war? A. They feared the spread of communism. B. They had alliances with those countries. C. They wanted to gain control of more land. Or D. They wanted to colonize those countries. The correct answer is B. The reason other European countries became involved in the war was that they had alliances with Austria-Hungary and with Serbia. The Great Depression and the Dust Bowl. As Europe recovered from the war, the United States experienced the Great Depression and the Dust Bowl. The Great Depression was an economic crisis caused by the collapse of the stock market, while the Dust Bowl was a series of droughts and poor farming practices that led to massive losses of topsoil in many states in the Great Plains. This led to the federal government establishing the New Deal, a series of social programs designed to employ people in infrastructure projects funded by the federal government that would help them overcome the hardship of the Depression. Causes of World War II. Germany was required to pay reparations to the Allies who had defeated them in World War I. This left the German economy crippled and the people starving. Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party, a nationalist party that advocated German pride and ethnocentrism, became popular as he offered to lead the German people to once again enjoy social, political, and military dominance. After his rise to power, he began invading neighboring nations in Europe and putting Jews and other minorities in concentration camps where they were tortured, forced to do hard labor, and ultimately killed. Review question. The Holocaust, the imprisonment and murder of Jews and other minorities, was carried out under the command of what nation? A. England, B. France, C. Italy, or D. Germany? The correct answer is D. The Holocaust was carried out under the command of Germany by Hitler and the Nazis. World War II, American involvement. Japan, a German ally, bombed the United States military base at Pearl Harbor in Honolulu on December 7, 1941, bringing the United States into the war. The United States allied with Great Britain and the Soviet Union to defeat Hitler and the Nazis. The war was fought on two fronts, the European and the Pacific Front. One of the most significant developments from this war was the first use of the atomic bomb on the cities of Hiroshima on August 6th and Nagasaki on August 9th of 1945. World War II ends and the Cold War begins. World War II ended in 1945 with a victory for the Allies. The unity that had held them together through the war was short-lived because the United States and Great Britain held very different ideological views than the Soviet Union. While the United States and Great Britain were democratic countries, meaning that they had capitalist economies and free elections, the Soviet Union was communist, meaning that they had a demand economy controlled by the government and a single-party political system. The political and ideological differences caused them to be at odds with one another because both wanted to spread their political and economic system. Review question. What ideological difference caused the Cold War? A. Communism versus socialism. B. Capitalism versus democracy. C. Communism versus democracy. Or D. Parliamentarianism versus communism. The correct answer is C. The ideological difference that caused the Cold War was communism versus democracy. The Cold War, 1947 to 1991. The Cold War received its name because the war never resulted in direct combat between the United States and the Soviet Union. Instead, both countries engaged in an ongoing battle of espionage and an arms race to remain prepared for war should the other attack. Since both countries held nuclear weapons, they knew that if either of them launched their weapons, there would be a counterattack and it would result in mutual, assured destruction. While the countries never fought directly, the Korean conflict and the Vietnam War were both proxy wars designed to prevent the Soviet Union from spreading communism into Southern Asia. The struggle for equality. One of the major themes of the mid-20th century was decolonization. After the end of World War II, the European countries that had colonized much of Africa and Asia began decolonizing these areas and granting them independence and self-rule. It is important to note that these nations still deal with their colonial legacy and the years of lost resources. In addition to the struggle on the national level, there have been significant steps made toward increasing the rights of women and minorities in many parts of the world. While there has been progress, the quest for human rights is still a major theme in the 21st century.